We're harvesting souls and fueling the celestial war. That's right, it's Court of the Dead, Mourners Call from Project Raygun. This sinister strategic competition pits 2 to 4 players against one another for control and unification of the Underworld. Setup begins with the game board of the Underworld capital city of Inverness placed center. Shuffle the 14 court cards representing Death's most powerful minions and place them face down in the court space. Shuffle and place the Wallows cards representing the quests handed down from the Court of the Dead, providing objectives for each player to complete on their turn. Place Unity tokens on the Unity supply depending on the number of players in this graphic, and all the fancy Etheria pieces on their supply space. Put a track token on each of the 0 spaces of the Celestial Suspicion track and the Dread Script threat meter. Set up the guild figures nearby and place their associated mourner cards alongside. Be sure to set aside the starting mourner cards marked with a banner in the top right. The 3 factions of Dead are Bone, Flesh, and Spirit, and each are divided into 2 guilds. We got Mortis Knighthood, Council of Osteomancy, Shroud Reeves Coven, Conclave of Shadows, Grave Dancer Circle, and Dreadsbane Order. I can't even choose, they're all too dope. Next, each player takes a player board, 10 ring bases and 6 guild track tokens of the matching color, 3 track tokens placed on the starting spaces of the influence tracks of the 3 factions of the Dead, and 2 Etheria pieces. The oldest player gains the All-Taker token and becomes the first player. Finally, shuffle the ulterior motive cards and deal 3 of them to each player, 1 card from each faction. These secret objectives represent the will of each faction in the City of the Dead. Players keep 1 face down and remove the other 2 from the game. Once all players have selected an ulterior motive, everyone places the matching faction token onto their player board, openly declaring their allegiance, but not their motive. In reverse turn order, ending with the first player, everyone then draws a random mourner card from the relevant faction from those starter mourner cards set aside earlier. Shuffle the leftovers into the relevant decks. Players place their mourner card face up in front of their play area and then take 1 guild figure of the type indicated at the bottom of the card. See? After adding it to a ring base from their supply, place the figure in your crypt section. Players add a guild tracker token to that guild's first space over on the game board. As players gather power, they might increase the Dread Script threat meter, which marks the temptation the Dead have for mindless destruction, or the Celestial Suspicion meter, which tracks heaven and hell's wariness of the Dead. Should either meter rise too high in the game, players will take penalties and lose resources, so keep the Celestials distracted and the Dread Script under control. Gameplay occurs over several turns, each divided into 8 phases, listed right here on this phase order card. When the final Unity token is acquired, then the end game is triggered and that round will be the last. Let's talk phases. In the first phase, Ethereal Distribution, the first player is going to roll d6s equal to the number of players, add them up, and take that number of Etheria from the supply. Etheria acts as one of the main magical resources of the game, powering various undead abilities. You want it. Next, the first player divides the Etheria into a number of piles equal to the number of players plus 1. Starting to the left of the first player and going clockwise, each player chooses a pile or may instead gain 2 faction influence of their choice. Once everyone has chosen a pile or taken the influence, the remaining Etheria are placed into the Dearth Forge. In the second phase, each player draws a Wallows card and places it face up in front of them. These represent the quests players have to complete by the end of the round before it's discarded. Objectives include things like fighting wild undead, known as rakers, or completing certain tactical moves on the board. Generally speaking, there's a reward for success and a penalty for failure. Next comes the court card drafting. Shuffle the 14 court cards and deal them out on the table face down according to the handy drafting table. Cards are then passed clockwise in the odd-numbered rounds and counterclockwise in the even rounds to ensure that you draft from different players. After everyone has selected and passed equal to the drafting chart, the remaining court cards return to the board, and it's on to the action phase. Starting with the first player and proceeding clockwise, each player takes 1 action. Actions include play a court card from their hand face up on the table, Court cards are powerful and can provide key resources, distract Celestials, and even steal items from other players. After use, the court card is discarded face up to the top of the court supply. Recruit either a guild figure for 3 Etheria or a Mourner card for 5 Etheria. Guild figures are the workers of the game, activating the various locations in Ilverness. When taking a Mourner card, the owner also receives a guild figure based on that card. In either case, the player adjusts the appropriate guild track and increases the Dread's Grip threat meter by 1. Move a guild figure from either the crypt to a location on the board, or from one location to another. When moving, a player can move any number of guild figures from one place to another, but must pay the faction influence of the destination per figure move. Activate a Mourner card. While some Mourner cards have triggered effects, others require an action which the player can take during this phase. Pass to relinquish your turn. The action phase continues until all players have passed in succession. A player who passes can still perform an action again in the rotation, provided another player takes an action in between. After the action phase, it's time to resolve the Dread's Grip threat by ensuring no single location contains a number of figures exceeding the current threat on the right side of the meter. If a location exceeds this limit, each player with a guild figure there must roll 1 die per figure. A 1 result destroys the figure, a 2 sends them back to your crypt, and a 3 through 6 means you're safe. Next, pay the tithe. The Celestials require a steady stream of Etheria to keep them distracted in the Eternal War. On the right side of the Celestial meter, add the number of players plus the lower number to calculate that tithe. Etheria on the Dearth Forge is applied first, then the remainder must be paid by the players via a blind bid system. After some discussion, everyone removes their Etheria from their player board and secretly places their contribution into a closed hand. Once everyone has decided, players open their hands simultaneously and commit all the Etheria revealed to the tithe, returning them to the supply. If the quota is met, the contributors receive rewards in the form of Unity tokens, cause they work together, people. If the quota is not met, both meters go up, and players are penalized if they didn't even bother to help. Like me, I'm not gonna help. You guys figure it out. Next, resolve locations and guilds on the board. The player with the most influence in a location, either higher guild rating or more figures in a location, gains the reward listed below. If there's a tie, no player gains the reward. However, the owner of the All Taker may break 1 tie per turn during this phase. Finally, clean up the board by resolving any end-of-turn Mourner cards. If any Unity tokens remain in the supply, start another round. Otherwise, proceed to the end game. Players determine their final score by first revealing their ulterior motive and scoring points earned for their objective. Next, add up your Unity tokens, 1 point per token, and faction influence from all 3 factions, the scores for which live above their tracks. Highest score wins and becomes the dominant general by Death's side. How wonderful. And that's Court of the Dead. I'm Becca Scott, and I'm surrounded by mourners. Look at this guy. He looks like this guy I dated in high school. Troy, is that you? Anyway, you can watch me play this game and other awesome games on Game the Game right here on Geek and Sundry. I'll see you there.